Ever have one of those days where you call the cops for trespassing, only to find out the trespasser is the sheriff, and it's actually his land you're standing on? Yeah, that happened. To me, Sheriff Brody Vance, on a perfectly sunny Saturday morning. I'd pulled my truck onto the edge of the 30-acre plot I inherited from my late uncle over in Davison County. I hadn't even finished the taco I was eating, deed tucked under my arm, when a woman materialized. Neon yoga pants, a visor shading her face, and the righteous fury of 1,000 suns. "You're trespassing on private property," she shrieked, phone already dialing. "I've called the police." I leaned against the truck's hood, my boots crunching on gravel that shouldn't have been there. "Ma'am," I said, deadpan, "I am the police." That was my introduction to Karen Bishop, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Apparently, she was the self-appointed dictator of this slice of suburbia, wielding her laminated clipboard like a royal scepter. I'd driven out to check the back acres, maybe measure for some fence posts, figure out what to do with the old dilapidated shed my uncle left. Instead, I got ambushed by a banshee accusing me of invading a neighborhood that was, legally and entirely, mine. Every blade of grass, every misplaced garden gnome. I've been sheriff of Davison County for 12 years. Seen it all: bar brawls, petty theft, even wrestled a rogue goat off a stolen tractor once. Nothing prepared me for the sheer, unadulterated certainty of Karen Bishop's fury. She didn't recognize me out of uniform, storming closer, clipboard held high. "This is HOA-monitored land. I can issue citations." I raised an eyebrow, slowly pulled out my wallet, and flipped open my badge. Her eyes narrowed, skepticism radiating off her like heat waves. "You expect me to believe that?" she hissed. It wasn't just ignorance. It was the unmistakable tone of someone high on their own minuscule authority. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was mainlining control. "I'll have the real sheriff here in 5 minutes," she snapped, jabbing at her phone. "Make it 4. I mumbled around my taco. "He hates waiting." As she stomped off towards the nearest beige McMansion, I surveyed the scene. Where dense woods and deer trails should have been, neat rows of identical houses with matching mailboxes now stood. Somehow, between my uncle's passing and the probate process clearing, Redwood Development had managed to slap a gated community onto my inheritance. 5 minutes later, Deputy Miller rolled up. She spotted me, a slow chuckle escaping as she got out of her patrol car. Karen charged towards her, pointing dramatically. "That man, he's trespassing. He threatened me. And he's eating in public violation of community cleanliness standards." Miller blinked, glanced at me, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, that's Sheriff Brody Vance." Karen Bishop's jaw didn't just drop, it nearly unhinged. But she recovered with astonishing speed. "Then I'm filing a complaint with the state police. You think that badge makes you untouchable?" Miller looked at me, a question in her eyes. I shrugged. "Arrest me now. Save yourself the paperwork later." Karen's face flushed crimson. She spun on her heel, vowing to summon the entire HOA board, and marched away. It might have been funny if her absolute conviction hadn't sparked a nagging worry. How could anyone, think this development was legitimate? That evening, back at the station, I dug into the county records. The deed was ironclad: the 30 acres were mine. No sales, no transfers. Yet Redwood Development had built Oak Ridge Estates right on top of it, seemingly without a single permit, zoning variance, or notification. The scant paperwork available looked suspiciously flimsy, like they'd gambled I'd never notice or care. I called Redwood Development. A polite receptionist promised to call back. It never came. The following weekend, I returned, armed with a folding chair, a notebook, and grim determination. I set up shop on the sidewalk, and started documenting violations. Unmarked utility boxes, fire hydrants blocking driveways, even a golf cart with security peeling off the side patrolling aimlessly. Karen appeared within 20 minutes, hands planted firmly on her hips. "You're back." "Just inspecting my property," I said without looking up, jotting notes. "This is private community property," she scoffed. I flipped open the copy of my deed, pointing to a highlighted clause. "Actually, according to this, I could build a rather large skate park right here. You're currently standing on my easement." Her eye twitched. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said, finally meeting her gaze. I think it's tragic that good people are paying hefty HOA fees to an entity that doesn't legally own the ground beneath their feet. Her silence, though brief, was telling. She walked away, less certain this time, more rattled. This wasn't just about me anymore. If Redwood forged documents or exploited loopholes to build Oak Ridge, it was large-scale fraud. Criminal fraud. And if Karen Bishop, knowingly or unknowingly, was complicit, she was facing more than just HOA fines. As I watched kids ride bikes past houses built on land they didn't know was stolen, I noticed orange survey flags deeper in the woods. Phase 2. They wouldn't stop unless I stopped them. At the town library, buried in dusty zoning records, I found it. A conditional annexation clause. It stipulated that if a property owner didn't respond to development inquiries within 6 months, the land could be annexed under an emergency housing provision. Except my uncle's will took 9 months to process due to a county backlog. No one had ever notified me, or his estate, of any development proposal. This wasn't sloppy paperwork, it felt deliberate. Redwood had gamed the system, and someone within the county planning department had likely looked the other way. Later, parked near the untouched section of woods marked by a rusted boundary stake, I saw more orange flags. Then Mrs. Gable, an elderly resident whose house bordered the original property line, waved me over from her porch. "Sheriff," she said quietly, handing me a glass of lemonade, "I knew you didn't sell this land. My son's a surveyor. He showed me the county plat map years ago. It doesn't match the HOA's layout." When I asked why she hadn't spoken up, she sighed. "Making waves gets you fined, Sheriff. Karen calls it disrupting community flow. Fined me last month for sonically intrusive wind chimes." She then handed me a binder thick enough to stop a bullet, stuffed with HOA minutes, angry emails, and photos of Karen meticulously measuring lawn heights. Karen hadn't just run the HOA. She'd turned it into her personal fiefdom, silencing dissent with petty fines and bureaucratic intimidation. Back at the station, Miller grinned over iced coffee. "How's life behind enemy lines, boss?" I spread Mrs. Gable's binder across my desk. "They're planning phase 2, Miller. And Karen's either neck-deep in the fraud or so lost in her HOA power trip, she can't see she's ruling over stolen ground." Miller snorted, reading a fine levied for an unapproved inflatable kiddie pool. I made a decision. 2 nights later, I walked into the Oak Ridge Estates Clubhouse community meeting, not as sheriff, but as a concerned resident. Karen was at the podium, proudly announcing a 2% rise in property values. Based on what? And boasting about fine collections. When the floor opened for comments, I stood up. "Name's Brody Vance. I'm the sheriff of Davison County. And I'm the legal owner of the land this entire development is built on." The room went dead silent. Karen forced a laugh. "Is this some kind of joke, Sheriff?" I unfolded my deed. "Not even a little, Karen. As it turns out, I'm your landlord." A wave of murmurs swept the room. "And I have serious concerns that Redwood Development acquired this land through fraudulent means. If that's the case, your HOA, your rules, your fines, they might all be invalid." A man in the back stood up abruptly. "So the HOA is fake?" I nodded slowly. "It appears you've all been significantly misled." Karen banged her gavel. Meeting adjourned. "But Mrs. Gable rose shakily. "No, Karen," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I think it's just starting." The next morning, I met with Arthur Finch, a grizzled local attorney who smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and righteous indignation. He reviewed my deed, the zoning records, the annexation clause. He sighed, tapping the clause. "This isn't legally binding without proof of proper notification, Sheriff. And that forged signature on the alleged transfer document? Definitely not yours." "So I've been robbed," I stated flatly. "With either county complicity or staggering incompetence," Finch confirmed. We hatched a plan. A sting. Deputy Miller and I created a fake seller identity, offering Redwood Development the remaining untouched acreage adjacent to Oak Ridge. Within days, their acquisitions rep was eager for a fast-track, under-the-table deal. Too easy. He'd clearly done this before. Meanwhile, Karen went nuclear. She distributed flyers door to door, calling me a dangerous impersonator and a threat to the community, complete with a grainy photo of me standing in my yard labeled Trespasser. Some residents bought it, terrified of her fines. But others, emboldened by Mrs. Gable and my appearance at the meeting, started asking questions. "You really own the land?" a man asked me at the local diner. "Every square inch," I confirmed. "And the HOA?" I nodded. "Likely has no legal standing. Every fine might be unenforceable." Karen escalated, installing more security cameras, pointed outwards, naturally, and fining someone $200 for excessively cheerful Halloween decorations. But the cracks in her authority were widening. More people attended HOA meetings, questioning her budget, her rules. I stood outside the next meeting with a simple sign, "Know your landlord." It drew a small crowd. Then, a mid-level city planning official showed up at my office with a bombshell, a recently filed quitclaim deed, supposedly transferring my land to Redwood Development, signed by me. Or rather, with a forgery of my signature. Karen, who had apparently been tipped off, smirked from the doorway during a subsequent, tense HOA meeting. "Your little story seems to be falling apart, Sheriff." I held up a copy of the forged document. "Perhaps, but forging a sheriff's signature? That's a state-level felony." Miller fast-tracked a forensic analysis. The signature was definitively fake. The courier who filed it, a known Redwood contractor, quickly confessed under pressure. He'd been paid cash to deliver the document and disappear. We set the final trap, a meeting with the Redwood Acquisitions rep at a neutral restaurant, wired for audio and video by Miller's team. I walked in, uniform on this time. As he slid more forged documents across the table, bragging about the smooth process, I leaned forward. "Mind if I join you?" The color drained from his face. I bagged the evidence, read him his rights right there between the breadsticks and the calamari. A search of his laptop revealed emails from Karen Bishop, actively pushing the fraudulent scheme forward, even suggesting ways to bypass that stubborn sheriff. The arrests were satisfyingly public. As deputies led a sputtering Karen Bishop away in handcuffs, Mrs. Gable stood on her lawn holding a simple, handmade sign. HOA stands for Highly Overdue Arrests. A palpable sense of relief settled over Oak Ridge Estates. Bushes went untrimmed, lawn flags tilted at Johnny angles. Neighbors actually talked to each other over fences without fear. The Redwood rep faced multiple fraud charges. Karen was hit with conspiracy, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. Turns out her prize-winning koi pond and imported azaleas weren't paid for by bake sales. A nervous county clerk, promised a lenient deal, spilled the details of how the initial annexation oversight happened. I drove out to the back acres and planted a large "Construction Ceased" sign next to the old, rusted boundary marker. It wasn't strictly legal, but it sent the message. The sting footage was damning. The Redwood rep had joked about dealing with sleepy county sheriffs who wouldn't fight back. They picked the wrong county. The district attorney filed indictments. Arthur Finch formally dissolved the illegitimate HOA. The residents, free from Karen's tyranny, formed a voluntary neighborhood council. They invited me to their first meeting, an informal gathering in the community park. I showed up in jeans, just another neighbor. They presented me with a small, humorous plaque, property of Sheriff Vance. "Please trespass kindly." Someone had named the park bench nearest Karen's old house, Karen's Timeout. I laughed harder than I had in months. Oak Ridge Estates still stood. Nobody was tearing down homes. But the oppressive control vanished. Wind chimes reappeared, trampolines bounced freely, and a cardboard sign near the entrance read, "Now accepting common sense." Driving home that evening, tipping my hat to neighbors relaxing on their porches, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My land was mine again. The town had its peace back. And Karen Bishop? Last I heard, she was trying to organize an inmate HOA in the county jail. Good luck with that.